Hi and welcome. I'm Andi Mioc and you are watching Headlines. The European Parliament adopted a new resolution on Georgia calling for sanctions against the elite associated with the governing Georgian Dream Party. In a new draft resolution, MEPs have expanded the list of people they would like to see sanctioned. They once again refused to recognize what they call self-proclaimed authorities in Georgia and said they continue to recognize Salome Zurabishvili as the country's legitimate president. The resolution was supported by 400 MEPs. 63 voted against, while 81 abstained. The document calls on the Council of the EU and the member states to impose sanctions on, quote, Bidzina Ivanishvili's network of supporters, entourage, financiers, propagandists, and those who support the state apparatus. On the latest messages from Brussels to Tbilisi, we're talking to political analyst Gia Abashidze, joining us from Tbilisi. Hi, Gia, thank you for joining us. Now, even though European Parliament resolutions are largely symbolic with no legal force, what do you make of this expanded list and the sheer message coming from Brussels?
Well, basically, it's another piece of paper for the majority of Georgian society who is get used to so-called resolutions, toxic statements from Brussels, Strasbourg, sometimes from Washington by the kind of separate members of the political elites in the United States, but basically means nothing for Georgian society because we have seen such resolutions where they were demanding to release ex-president Saakashvili as if he was tortured, kind of poisoned, and then Strasbourg court confirmed that Saakashvili was not poisoned and tortured, and they just ignored Strasbourg court's findings and verdict. Again, they call on legitimate, democratically elected government to announce so-called snap elections. They recognize already outdated Salome Zurabishvili. She is no longer president since December 19, and they recognize her as a president. She is not a so-called Tikhanovskaya in Belarus. She wants to pretend as a Georgian Tikhanovskaya, a Georgian political martyr, but she is not. She had the support of Georgian Dream. Then she derived from the constitutional path. Constitutional court in Georgia recognized her as violator of constitution many times, numerous times. And so what? What does this resolution give to the European Parliament other than disgust? Yes, I'm emphasizing disgust and negative attitudes in the majority of Georgian society, who by 54% elected Georgian Dream government for the fourth time.
Georgia's Prime Minister Irakli Kobahidze said that EP's resolutions are worth nothing and are unfair. How worried would you say that Georgian officials, you said Georgian society would not be worried, but officials, how much would they be worried if other member states, besides the Baltic nations that have already done so, decided to sanction them and their families, seeing as how the bloc's sanctions are off the table with Bratislava and Budapest opposing them?
Well, how can they sanction Georgian officials if they don't have any so-called properties, mansion houses, yachts, and kind of millions of dollars and euros in European banks? Georgian officials do not hold such accounts and such wealth, unlike Ukrainian officials who pretend to kind of work on their salaries. But well, there will be maybe travel restrictions like visa restrictions for diplomatic passports. So what? They already sanctioned a few years ago Bidzina Ivanishvili when they seized very illegally, unlawfully his assets in the Swiss bank. And Bidzina Ivanishvili is fighting in international arbitrations to gain his money back. And well, again, this happened before the Russian invasion in Ukraine. And it means nothing, really nothing. And what's the problem is for Brussels and for Eurocrats is that member of the European Parliament, a member of the European Commission or European Commissioner has become a word or a slamming word, disgusting word. joke word, Georgian society. Even, any anti-Western propaganda could dream about to kind of damage image of Europeans in such way as the Europeans did themselves. So it's unbelievable. It means nothing. It's one and for sure Georgian society. If this government is fighting for independence, freedom and sovereignty of this country and is punished for that with different sanctions and resolutions and blah, 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 it means that this government was who have been elected for the fourth time in October 26 last year.
Still not the country, only the officials. This is the second resolution critical of Georgia's officials since the October election. The country saw mass protests following the election. The opposition claims were rigged, and the decision of the ruling party to suspend EU accession talks until 2028. How much can Western support, including Brussels, bring for the parts of society that are seeking a rerun of the election?
Well, the main problem here is what the Georgian Dream was saying for a number of years, that it was so-called propaganda. It was the dirty Western money was supporting so-called NGOs, radical NGOs, in fight to topple down this government. What happens after January 20? Trump administration says that USAID is a kind of parasite of budget, mishandling taxpayers' money of America and spending in various negative activities worldwide. And then we're heard that around 40-something million USD was spent in Georgia for so-called civil societies to organize these radical protests, Molotov cocktails, these fireworks, throwing to the policemen, etc., etc. So, what does it mean? And have they ever provided any solid kind of arguments and evidence that the elections were rigged by 300,000 votes, electronic elections, first time in Georgia? But there is facts. Facts, they don't have facts, but perception is because Georgian Dream is punished, because it's not a vassal and won't be a so-called servant of the bureaucrats in European Union. And it doesn't matter how many so-called resolutions, piece of papers will they adopt, and statements with some Baltic countries or some Western European kind of shameful politicians will make. It does not work. Few hundred protesters every day do not reflect moods and attitudes of Georgians. The statehood is there. The ordinary ongoing. There is no political crisis. It's political tension. Political crisis happen when institutions are down and when there is a total strike in this country. No, few hours every evening, few hundred people on Rustaveli in front of parliament, and they think in the West some, not all. This is a public protest. No, let's look at the real, genuine facts. Nothing is happening in Georgia, but negative PR and statements do not reflect the real temper of society in this country.
Still, even if a few hundred people protest, we've seen how the mass protests looked like just a month or 2 months ago, with tens of thousands in the streets, with many of them carrying EU flags. Do you see any possibility for those parts of society to be offered an olive branch, maybe snap election or other measures? What can be done here to curb the dissent?
Well, the government has offered numerous times come and talk, but the opposition has their own red line. They say snap elections. This is a red line for the government, which has received more than 1,120,000 votes, and they were not rigged, and nobody has ever said from the international actors, and main international observer was always dear that elections were rigged. They said were free and democratic. So, two red lines. What's next? If the opposition are not coming to the government table, well, that's there, and they claim that they are political prisoners. Political prisoner is not a person or group of persons who attack police officers. It is not a political prisoner in Paris, in London, or elsewhere. When you attack a police officer, you are punished. You are the police prison. Few thousand protests. Well, where are they? Where are they? Few hundred, 400, 600 doesn't mean anything. 1,120,000 votes were counted for the Georgian dream. And Georgian government respects this democratic vote. So I don't know what will happen. The expectation is that this protest will come down amid the processes what are ongoing globally from United States. Now we see that the war is going to end in Ukraine. Well, many different external factors will also influence internal processes in Georgia.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your insights and opinions.
Thank you very much.
That's all we had for you in this edition of Headlines. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.